right, Brad, as we move on to the preparation stage, this is one that I feel comes up virtually on every conversation I have with a CEO or founder who's looking to raise capital. Now, for the customers that purchase the Venture Finance Masterclass, they always give the feedback that, I've covered lesson 2, getting your house in order. And it's a topic that's so underrated, which is basically the due diligence process. Okay, so Brad, could you provide some insight into why it's super important to ensure that you are prepared for a due diligence process with an investor?
House in order, let's assume, and we talk about some of this in the Venture Finance Master, let's assume you're trying to sell your house or rent your house. If a prospective buyer comes in and it stinks, it has a bad paint job, the yard looks like crap, who knows? You go into the bedrooms and stuff's like coming out of the closets, you're probably not going to get max value. I mean, there's lots of TV shows that talk about what you got to do.
Yeah.
And frankly, it's no different. I mean, so getting your house in order means that, as the name suggests, you've done the work. You've properly set up the company. You've got the appropriate agreements in place with all the right people. The company actually owns the intellectual property. Maybe you have an equity incentive plan. That's just important sometimes with certain kinds of companies. You filed all your tax returns. You don't have a bunch of loose ends, or as I would say, you don't have skeletons in the closet.
Right.
You don't have, God forbid, bodies buried in the backyard. I mean, I talk about that, and you laugh about it, but I've seen just some incredibly sloppy things. And if you don't have your house in order, even if you find somebody who loves your deal, so think about it as, dating. You met somebody, you're like, wow, let's go back to my place. If they get there and it just isn't appealing, it's probably not going to end well, right? And so it's the same with investing. That's what getting your house in order is all about.
So how do you feel one can prepare themselves for that process?
What we do in the Venture Finance Masterclass is we actually go through an assessment. A good way to do it is to just get a due diligence document request list.
Okay.
I mean, it's kind of a cheat sheet because this is what a sophisticated investor will likely ask for.
Right.
And then you just organize your online, and to the extent people still do it, hard copy files and say, okay, these are everything that I have related to that, and you organize it so that it's easily accessible for you and for others, and that it's true, complete, and correct.
So it sounds like what you're saying is the best way to prepare is to make sure that all of your files and relevant documents for your business is organized and easily accessible. So I guess there's many ways to do that, and one of the ways you mentioned was a hard copy. But if you was to prepare that online, what's the terminology that would be used?
Well, data rooms is what people call them, or lockers, digital lockers.
Okay.
And there are lots of different ways. You can do it using a professional deal data room, which is what sophisticated transactions, law firms, investment banks, that kind of stuff use. But you don't need it for a startup. I mean, you could use Dropbox.
Okay.
You can, whatever. You could use, Google, whatever it is. But I think you do want, because you're dealing with company-sensitive documents, you want it to be secure.
Okay.
And you don't want to give access to just any old Tom, Dick, and Harry. You want to make sure you can restrict who has access to it, for what purpose, so on and so forth. But that's important.
Brilliant. Okay, so for the due diligence, it sounds like it's super important to prepare your data room or your digital locker. Now, if we were to move on to the next step, which is really a compelling offer and preparing a compelling offer for your investor, what's that all about?
In the educational part, we talked about understanding what the range of potential sources of capital are. The compelling offer would be if you've said, look, this is my ideal source of capital.
Right.
Then if you've done your homework, you would know that source of capital is going to need X and Y and Z. You want to offer them X, Y, and Z. You don't want to offer them A, B, and C, not X, Y, and Z, because even if they like you, you haven't met their deal requirements. So the compelling offer is to say, okay, This is something that we believe is attractive and within your deal parameters, and it should be within the ballpark of acceptability. And if you know what you're talking about, you should know. So, what is, for example, not acceptable? And this is where I've seen some crazy stuff. Valuation, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right? But if you're a company that has like one employee and two contractors in Bolivia, and you're saying, hey, I want to raise $10 million for 10% of the company, I don't think that's very compelling.
All right.
Okay. I think we'd probably all agree that it's a horrible deal, and you probably aren't going to get anyone to do it. I could be wrong, because maybe this one guy is Elon Musk,
Right.
and he's got two geniuses sitting in Bolivia. So it's possible that somebody could get that deal done. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's highly unlikely. Okay, so now what if you're in the ballpark? And valuations go up or down. Right now we're in a difficult market, valuations are down. Do you want to get aggressive on valuation? Do you want to say, oh, well, back in November, there was another company and they didn't have a minimum viable product and they raised a bunch of money. So now here we are, it's June 2022. The whole world has changed in many respects. And if you go to the market and say, yeah, I want the same deal that company got, good luck trying. But it's about, I guess what I'm saying is, what's a compelling offer? If you turn the tables, would you do that deal?
That's a great question.
Okay.
And this is really interesting that you say this, because when I speak to founders of early stage startups, the actual perception they have is when it comes to an offer, that's not something they should be making. That's something they actually expect from the investor in a form of a term sheet, for example. Now, is it okay for a founder who's raising money and not to make a compelling offer? Could they just wait for the investor?
Well, back in the good old days of VC, it was the VCs in the States. When I was working in the West Coast in the 1990s, it was generally conventional wisdom that it would be rude for you to present an offer to a VC. That was their job. They were supposed to present the offer to you.
Right.
I think it's not true that it's disrespectful to go even to a VC and say, I think you do need to allow them and pay them the professional courtesy, and this is talking about sophisticated investors, to say, look, these are our terms and conditions. Maybe you can get competing term sheets, kind of stuff. Now, if you're talking about going to somebody that's not a professional investor, they don't have time to do it. I mean, are you like serious? I mean, so if you go, let's say you're raising angel money.
Yeah.
If you go to some random, and I've been approached, and it's actually one of the reasons I created these master classes,
Right.
is I've been approached not once, but literally probably thousands of times with this, hey, looking for some money, do you want to invest? Let's hear the pitch. What's the deal? I don't know. Why don't you make me an offer?
Right.
Are you kidding? So I think most investors would like to know that you've done the research, you have created an offer that you basically you think this hunts. I mean, that's a term. Does the dog hunt? If it's in the ballpark, you won't lose credibility. If you're outside the ballpark, people are just going to shut the book. If they've got a CRM database, they'll probably put something like, this guy's, completely out to lunch, unrealistic.
Right.
Don't want to even deal with them. If they don't keep a CRM, they might forget, and maybe you could come back 6 months later.
Right. But it's not something that's obvious to someone that's just starting out when it comes to raising capital, that they should prepare an offer. And I guess...
Well, okay, but okay, so if you were, let's say, really when you think about what is capital, it's something that enables you to do something, right? So in econ, you've got labor and capital. Those are the two key inputs that they always talk about, labor and capital. So if you raise capital from one source to enable you to hire people, if you were to hire somebody else, would you go to them and say, "Hey, make me an offer"?
I guess when you put it like that,
Probably not.
no. So I guess any sort of founder that's watching this or paying attention, do you feel like they would have the edge if they did prepare a compelling offer?
I think that they would understand that if they got traction with somebody and it was within the ballpark, they would know that, hey, even though this isn't exactly what I was looking for, it's close enough. And if you don't do that, then you won't know whether you're in the ballpark. You won't know how close you are. So I think it's lazy to not do the work. But just because you're making the offer doesn't mean the deal's done. You're not saying it's take it or leave it.
Right.
You're saying, this is what I think is credible. What do you think?
That makes a
Now,
lot of
once
sense.
there's a deal on the table that's been agreed to, you might then be locked into those deal terms for purposes of finding others to participate. You can't cut a different deal with every person. Like, he's dumb, so pre-market value, pre-money value is 20 million, but this guy's smart, so it's only 10. No, you don't want to do that.
Okay.
It's not cool. It's also, I would argue, probably illegal. You could make the case, at least in the U.S., that that would be a violation of securities laws. Now, who knows? By and large, I would say you would want similarly situated investors who come in at or about the same time to get the same deal.
Great, that's a fantastic insight that you've provided so far in regards to preparing your offer. But for you, Brad, and in your own experience, what would you say a minimal viable offer is?
Okay, so if the company has no existing outside investors, then the minimum viable offer would be a proposed term sheet. Could be just 2 pages.
Okay.
These are the key terms and conditions. These are the valuation. This is the cap table. This is the use of proceeds. This is the min that we're going to raise. This is the max that we're going to raise. What's the form of the instrument? Is it a SAFE or is it a preferred stock? Is it common stock? Is it convertible debt? But you want to have, the key. You don't actually have to have, at that point, if you don't have any existing investors,
Sure.
the full package. Now, if you don't have the full package and all you've got is a term sheet, the question is, how quickly could you develop the deal docs if you get a yes?
Okay.
And that's part of the equation is, do you in fact have deal execution capability? And if the answer is no, you got a problem, because you say, oh, I got a fish on, I just don't know how to get him in the boat.
Okay.
And so a big defining feature between, in my experience, companies that are successful and companies that aren't is they actually have a highly competent corporate securities lawyer or law firm that can produce and distribute and close the deal documents efficiently and credibly.
Brilliant.
If you don't have that, it's a problem.
So thanks for providing an insight into some of the things that need to be prepared, which does include preparing for your due diligence process and preparing a compelling offer. But Brad, what else do you think is needed in the toolkit to close deals with investors?
It's a good question. So let me distinguish between the, quote, minimum viable offer, which is the minimum,
Right.
so that you have something to talk about, and the preferred route, which is you have a complete toolkit. The complete toolkit, it's sales and marketing, right? So you need, in my view, and this is all subject to change depending on technology, but you should have scripts, right? So you've got several email introductions. How do you get cold email outreach? How do you have meetings with people and then thank them and say, hey, appreciate your time. Again, if you know anyone, please introduce me. So it's a forwardable email.
Okay.
Maybe you go to your own network and say, hey, I know that you know somebody. If I send you sort of the teaser, would you be willing to forward it? Make it easy for them so that literally all they got to do is say, hey, I've known Joe Blow here. He's great. I think you should take a look,
Right.
and so those warm introductions are important. What else needs to be in there? So in the old days, it was like a 2-page executive summary or a 1-pager, whatever it is, something that succinctly can define what you're doing I prefer one page or less.
Okay.
And sometimes it's a two-sided one pager.
Right.
Okay, that's good enough for me. The deck. You got to have a deck.
Yeah.
At least everyone thinks you need to have a deck, and I would say, since most people think you need to, you probably do.
Okay.
There might be somebody who doesn't like decks, but most people still like decks. So you got to have a deck. It has to be credible. It has to address the relevant things. It should be designed well. It should be visually appealing. I personally think that in the modern age, if you're serious, you should have a professionally produced 3-minute video.
Okay.
Picture's worth 1,000 words, and I think that people like videos, and they'll watch a 3-minute video. Why 3 minutes? So many of the demo day things and the pitch day things, this, that, and the other thing, the standard has become 3 minutes.
Okay.
So make it 3 minutes. That way you can reuse it. So these are the toolkits. I'm of the view that if you have a good deal-intensive corporate securities lawyer, you should also have the other supporting documents in a form that can be quickly distributed and entered into through DocuSign or other electronic signature,
Yeah.
so that if you do get a yes, you're able to close before they change their mind.
Mine's right. Yeah.
Because if a deal goes stale, and it doesn't take that long, any number of things can happen
Right.
that changes everything. Especially right now with the dynamic market, interest rates go up. Hey, I need to renegotiate. I need to refinance my mortgage, and 2 months ago I thought I could do it at 3%, and now it's 6%. Everything's changed. It's like, okay, forget it. I'm not doing these deals anymore. Or who knows what the change is. The bank has completely new underwriting requirements, which means I don't have liquidity. So there's a million things. So you got to be, especially in a market like this, you have to be prepared. So that's the system that the best players, and you ask, what's the difference between the best players, the ones who win, and the ones who just play and don't close? And it's because the best players are ready to close.
This is really interesting, Brad, because a lot of the people that I speak to who are looking to fundraise, they believe all they need to prepare is a pitch deck. And I quite often hear from founders all the time that they've sent a pitch deck to a VC and they never got a response or a reply. So it's pretty obvious to me that there's a lot more they need to prepare. But what other things do you think would be important to prepare?
Yeah, so there's two questions there. Just because you send a pitch deck to a VC doesn't mean that you will get a reply. If they want to engage with you, they will. But if they do engage with you, I can assure you that they'll want to see a lot more than just a pitch deck.
Right.
Okay. So the other thing that we know from working with lots of founders is that they haven't done the work to create a credible financial model. If you don't do that, who's going to invest in your business, right? So you have to have, obviously, an ability to inspire people that you're the person that's going to, make this thing a reality. But you also have to be real. Like, okay, if we raise X, this is how the money will be used. Here's the financial model. This is how we will use the proceeds. This was when we anticipate revenues, or maybe it's an existing company and it's like, okay, we have existing income statement. This is our existing balance sheet. If we invest in X, like for example, marketing, we think we'll get a customer acquisition cost of Y, and therefore our revenue is going to go to Z. And you can play around with it, and you might have different scenarios. You might say, well, how much are you trying to raise? Well, minimum $500,000, minimum $5 million, whatever. Maximum, whatever it is. Is it minimum 1, max 5? Is it? But it's a very different investment, right? If you're raising sort of the minimum amount necessary to prove whatever it is you're trying to prove, versus, loading up the tank like was happening in 2021. Just go for broke, man. Just give me it all. you know, we're going to fill the super tanker full of gas and we're going to go to Mars, right? But in either case, you got to have a financial model. If you don't have a credible financial model, investors who can look in the mirror and respect themselves are going to require some kind of financial model. And that's important.
So you see with the financial model, is that something the CEO or founder can do? Is that a job for an accountant? I mean, who can prepare a financial model?
Somebody's got to own the financial model, and either if you're a founder that doesn't have the training, you need to get somebody on your team or hire somebody to build it so that it's credible. And that's fine, you know. So in an early stage company, everybody's wearing multiple hats. Maybe somebody on your team has a background and they're capable of being of generating the financial model. If they're not, that's okay. There's tons of individuals and services, and frankly, we've partnered with a company that's developed kind of a software as a service. It's a good way to plug in the inputs, the business model, and then you essentially don't have to create the financial model so much as you need to populate it and tweak it. And I think that's honestly a better way to do it. But you can just hire firms. And if you hire the right one or the right individual, fractional CFOs, for example, but it has to be credible.
In regards to the stage that we're at now, which is the preparation stage, we have covered, getting your house in order, which is the due diligence, preparing yourself for due diligence with your prospective investor. We've also looked at preparing, a compelling offer, what a minimal viable offer is and what an ideal offer would be for the investor, right? And then finally, the third part, we spoke about the toolkit that you need to prepare in order to successfully engage and close investors. Now that we've spoken about all the things that you need to prepare, it's finally time for us to move to the next stage, which is taking action.
Great, let's do it.